Okay, hi Julie, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. It's nice to have you
Thank you for
here.
having me.
So, you've got a book that we're going to be talking about called Dare to Become From the Corner Booth to the Corner Office. Before we get to your book, you've got a very interesting background, and I have a feeling that your background sort of led to the book. So, can you give us a little bit of your backstory, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been in business for the last 25 years. I started as a young girl. I lived in a small town, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, growing up. My parents were small business entrepreneurs. They invested in a restaurant. And so at the age of 16, I had the opportunity of learning what it took to build a successful business. So after having helped my family for 6 years with the business after college, I decided to go to Philadelphia and I swore that I would never go into business. It was too difficult. I was never going to to be a business owner. And I've done just that ever since. So early in my career, I worked for an entrepreneurship institute where I worked with early stage and startup companies that were looking for funding and was quickly recruited by a venture capital organization, also focused on early stage companies. And when I pivoted to Atlanta about 18 years ago, when I met my husband, I realized that the venture capital community here in the South was a little different than what I was used to. So I pivoted and started working for ad agencies as a strategist. And all of that experience that I had gained working for other people is actually really what propelled me to start my own agency 15 years ago.
One of the things that I think scares people away from starting their own business is the prospect of funding. And I know from myself, I started mine, over 10 years ago. But it's a one man operation for the most part. Now it's two and a half people. But, I just put my own money in because it wasn't that significant to do it, right? But if you're starting
Yes.
something else that you need hundreds of thousands of dollars to get going, I mean, I think that scares people off. My question is, how does one get that kind of money if you have no track record?
That's a very good question, one that I get often, I will say. So much like how you started your business, I bootstrapped my business. I started with my savings. Having worked in or around the venture capital space, I knew that I didn't need that much money, right, to start my company. I will say that if you are a service or a product-based company that does have a need for hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some case, it could be millions of dollars to develop a technology. I will say that it's incredibly important for you to have an investor presentation that walks investors through what your product or service is, what kind of funding you need, and how you're going to make them money. And I will tell you that, the race to get capital is one of the most difficult. You can certainly go to a bank. The SBA does loan money as well, the Small Business Administration or a traditional bank. But as you get into private equity and venture capital, they really are looking for executives, or at least that the management team has a lot of experience either building businesses or managing businesses. So that experience is incredibly important when you're trying to raise money from investors.
So, where do you get the experience? You have to work in the private sector first before you venture out on your own, right?
Essentially, yes. I mean, you not saying that you can't do it, but what I will say is that, unlike the tech bubble in the early 90s, I think what we all learned was that a lot of tech companies were coming out. They were, they had this great projection of how, VCs were going to make money. And when that burst, when that bubble burst, they lost a lot of money. And so now I will say that private equity and venture capital are definitely looking at the backgrounds of that senior leadership team. And if you don't have any experience, you either need to bring somebody on board who can bring that experience with them, or I do encourage people to go out into the industry and get enough knowledge in that space to make you more competent when you're pitching to investors.
Okay, because my understanding is with venture capital, if the company goes belly up, they just lose. There's no recourse for
Correct.
them, right?
Correct. And that's it's incredibly risky for the venture capitalist. I will say they tend to ask for quite a bit, in terms of percentage of the company or percentage return. What I will also say that I've learned, having consulted with more than 1,000 companies in the last 25 years, is it still is somebody's money, right? And so if you are going to go down the route of asking, institutional investors or investors to fund your business, you really do have to understand what that means. And so yes, the VCs hold the biggest risk because if it goes under, it goes under. But I will say that they're definitely a little bit, more careful these days to invest because they're trying to mitigate that risk. So if you don't have the experience and you don't have a clear plan for how you're going to earn how they're going to earn money, it's going to be a very difficult road to get funding.
Okay, so Dare to Become, just by the title, is this a sort of an encouragement for people to go out and do it and not be afraid? Confidence building?
It is. I had reached 13 years in business. I had achieved some milestones. I was very excited. And believe it or not, I actually found myself to be a little stuck and was sort of looking for inspiration from other business owners who'd been at it for whether it was 10 years or 13 years. And really, all I could find were books about how to become the next $100 million startup or how to start a $100,000 side hustle. And really, what I was looking for was camaraderie, just knowing that there were other people going through the same things I was. And so, Dare to Become, from the corner booth to the corner office, really actually came out of that time where I was looking for my own inspiration. And in the process of reading journals from the time I was 16 years old until now, I actually revisited my past and actually sort of read through journals of how far I'd come from working in my parents' restaurant to now owning and running my own agency for 13 years. And it was in the process of looking back that I actually found the words to write the book. And so it is a prescriptive bio with lots of really fun stories. Some are very raw and emotional, but it's really designed to give other people inspiration as they go along their journey.
So it's a memoir, would you call it that?
Yeah, I would call it more of a prescriptive bio. It's less about my full life. I really focus on really how working for my parents at the Avenue restaurant at such a young age and being exposed to the inner workings of a business, how that experience actually helped propel my career forward. And so I take a lot of the fundamental lessons that I learned working for them and I sort of show how I utilize that in the corporate environment and then how that translated into my own business as I've continued to grow it.
What does your agency do exactly?
So I own a full service marketing agency. So we, do everything from branding to logos, websites, and digital marketing. So we really touch the full service of marketing solutions for companies.
Okay, your clients are primarily what type of companies? All types?
Yeah, so we actually work with B2B, business to business and business to consumer. We do work across verticals. So one of the challenges that I've always given myself is that we don't just focus on one niche because we're able to actually learn a lot by working across industries. So yeah, we work in all major industries and have for the last 15 years and certainly have helped actually grow companies, some that came to us with an idea and we turned it in, to a business. We helped them execute, and then we've even stayed with some of our clients until they've exited or sold their company.
What are some of the most common mistakes that startups make?
Yeah, I think we touched on the biggest one, right, which is the financials. And I say it's not just about getting the funding, but I mean it when I say to you that it's one thing to create financial projections that you think look amazing and show this path to profitability. It's another thing to actually put those numbers on the page. And so I do feel like a lot of times entrepreneurs get so excited about what the possibility could be that they don't necessarily understand just how hard it is to get to that first milestone. So in my career, I've seen a lot of companies that say, I'm going to get to 100 million in revenue. And I always say, well, let's get to one first. And then once we get to one, let's get to 10. Once we get to 10, let's get to 25 because they're very different businesses. So understanding financials is a big one, not just how you're going to get money, but how you're going to be able to manage that money once you do get it. And the other area that I see is a lot of times entrepreneurs become inflexible. So when you're taking your product or service to market, you will have to adapt to your customers or the consumers that you're going after. So don't be so married to the product that you don't adapt it to reach your audience. And I see a lot of times entrepreneurs will play a lot with the versioning of the product, but you got to get that product to market and you got to get it in front of consumers and then adapt it based on how they're adopting that product or service.
If let's say you have a product and somebody might be too precious about it in terms of what, the packaging or
Yeah, it could be the packaging. I've seen a lot of tech companies that just they focus on user experience and the click through and the here are the drop downs and here are the features. And the reality is you need to go to market and find out if those are the features that your customers actually want, right? If we look back at Meta when it was just Facebook, that initial version of Facebook has grown tremendously in the last 20 years based off of how customers use the platform. So don't tool it so much that you build something that's so massive with so many features without really making sure that those are features that your customers are looking for.
well, Facebook is a great example because I've been with it since the beginning. And it
Yes,
started out as people posting cat pictures.
yes,
And now it's so powerful, it's affecting presidential elections.
correct. Yeah,
So I
and
suppose
if you'd
that's
asked
good.
Mark Zuckerberg if
Yeah.
he thought that that was going to be the future when he came out with the first feed, I mean, he could not have predicted, right, the power of this platform at that time. And so it is a great example of how he was able to adapt it. And then when platforms like TikTok came out, right, he was able to mimic the same functionality with the Reels so that when competitors came into the marketplace, he could come up with a feature that was the equivalent. And so that's where I say to folks, don't spend so much time that you lose time going to market and get people to adopt, whether it's your software or your service. You need to get money in the door, and then you can keep adding all of the extras as you grow.
We've got just about 2 minutes, and I wanted to ask you specifically, was there one particular mistake that you made on the way up that you think back and go, oh,
Yes, yes, there was. I think my biggest mistake and also one of the greatest learning lessons I had was that early on I had closed a client that was a significant portion of our business. It was more than 85% of our revenue. And at the time, we're excited, we're happy because it's such a large client. But we ended up 3 years after we got the client, we ended up losing that client. And so I had to go from having this company that we were building and this comfort of having a client that was that size to really having to roll my sleeves up and go hustle to replace that revenue, which I did. But what it taught me is that, clients can come and go. They can come quickly. They can go even quicker. So it's so important that you keep your eye on the financials and you make sure that one client isn't a larger percentage of your revenue, because that's where I could have saved myself a lot of sleepless nights.
has the book been released?
Yes, the book was released on September 3rd, and we've already hit some bestsellers lists, so we're super excited about it.
Well, Julia, I think on that we're going to wind this down. Thank you so much for coming on the show. The book is called Dare to Become, From the Corner Booth to the Corner Office. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Absolutely. I can be found at www.juliecroppgarelick.com, and all of my information and information about the book is on that website.
Okay, we'll put that up on the screen so people know how to spell it. And again, thank you for coming on. You plan on writing another book?
I am. I've got an outline for book number 2, so I think writing is definitely in my future.
Okay. Well, thank you and best of luck. I hope this goes well. Hope the book goes well.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.